Hello and welcome to the next Java session. Today's topic is data conversion. So let's start. Now, what do you mean by data conversion? Data conversion is nothing but you are trying to convert the data type from one type to another. Okay. Now, for example, consider this. You're trying to fill a jar full of juice into a glass. Okay. Now, this jar of juice is, for example, an int data type. Okay. And what are you trying to fill the data which is there inside this int, that is nothing but a juice, into a glass which is of type byte. Okay. Now when you're doing this, maybe some juice will get spilled, so the whole data won't get stored. Why? Because byte is having less storage space than the integer. We know that integer has 4 bytes of memory space and byte has just 1 byte of memory space. So when you try to do something like that, then you at times the data is lost. Okay, the whole data is not stored completely. So there are two different types of data conversions in Java: implicit data conversions and explicit data conversions. So now let's see what is an implicit data conversion. Now in Java, the compiler automatically does the implicit data conversion if it is not taken care by the programmer. Okay, now what do you mean by this? Who's the compiler? Your Java C. Okay, now what do you mean by this? Now for example, I have a variable having value as 30. Okay, now the variable is of type int and I try to store that particular value into a variable which is of type float. So what is happening? I am storing a value which is of type int into a value which is of type float. Okay, so what are we trying to do? We are trying to store a value which is having less memory space into a value having more memory space. So this over here, the data conversion from integer, that is k, from integer to float is done by the compiler. We don't have to take care of it. Okay, but the vice versa won't happen. That is, if I'm having a float variable having some value and I'm trying to store it into an integer, so float occupies more memory space than the integer. Like float you consider is to be a jar of juice and integer is nothing but your glass. Okay, so you are trying to store k which is of type float into m, so that won't be allowed. This type will be allowed, that is you're trying to store a smaller variable of a smaller memory space into a variable of a larger memory space. So this thing, the data conversion happens automatically by the compiler, but this thing is not being supported. Okay, so we'll just see one example of this. uh, Fine. So first we will see the implicit conversion, in which I have a variable, say k is a variable which is of type integer. K is a variable which is of type integer. I store some value in that and I am trying to store that value in a float variable, say f. Okay. So here what is happening is, this is implicit example of implicit conversion. That is, the compiler is only going to convert the k from integer to float, and if you store try to print the value of f, we will see what is the output we are getting. My command prompt is not working. Let me open it again. So here if I try to execute Sam, then you can see 32.0. So here what, that variable k which was of type integer got converted into float. Implicitly it got converted and we are getting the output as not just 32 but 32.0. So this was an example of an implicit conversion. Now what is the explicit conversion? Something like that. Okay, That is, you're trying to store, like here the variable k is of type float having some value, and now you're trying to store the value of k into m, wherein k is a float, it's a bigger memory space variable, and our m is a integer which is a smaller memory space variable. So if you want to forcefully convert that data type, then you have to mention the data type in a round bracket. So it is int, over here I am putting it in the round bracket. So I'm converting k into an integer and then storing it. Okay, so if you just do this example, I'll just twist it. Okay, or maybe I'll make another new one. Say I have a float variable, say f1 having some value 34.56, say, and I'm having an integer variable and I'm trying to store the float. Now initially I'll just try to do that, okay, and I will print the value of m. Fine. So initially I am not typecasting it, okay, I'm just leaving it as it is. That is, the float variable value, I am storing it in integer. So now you can see I got an error. Okay, this error says that possible lossy conversion from float to int. That is, it is not allowing us to store the value f1 which is of type float into m which is of type int, because m won't accommodate that particular data type. Okay, so here I will convert it into int by forcefully typecasting. This is called typecasting. Okay, this is an example of explicit conversion where the programmer has to do it. Fine. And then I am storing it inside the variable m. So now let's compile. Now this explicit typecasting the data type, you can mention anything. Now see, we didn't get any error over here because we forcefully typecasted it. Now you can see the value of f1 was 34.56, but the output we are getting in m is 34, because what is happening is, we are, as I told you, we lose the data, we don't get the whole data, because f1 is of type float, but when I typecast it, then whatever after decimal, that will get neglected and only 34 will get stored inside m. So the output we are getting over here is what? 34. So you can typecast implicit as well as explicit with any data types. Okay, that is double, float, long, byte, short, integer. So as and when you require it, we can typecast it. Now we will see how to read data from the keyword. Now in Java there are many Java class libraries, okay, and inside the Java class libraries there are many classes which are meant for certain like it is meant for certain thing to do. Like we have used a system class we are using, which is meant to print something on your console, the output screen. Similarly, you have a scanner class which is a part of the standard Java class library java.util.scanner. Now basically this particular scanner class will help us to read the data from our console. Now what is your console? When we are writing system.out.println, the output gets printed on this. So this is my console. So this is my system.out.console. And when I'm trying to read the data, this is only the console, but it will be system.in. Okay, so the same console will be treated as a console to accept the data from the user. So when we are accepting the data from the user, we have to make use of system.in console. Okay, system.in class. So we know that Java is made up of many classes, and all the classes has got certain set of methods in it. So if you have to use the method of any class, you have to create an object of that class. So here SC is nothing but the object of class scanner. Now in Java, when we create an object, we make use of the keyword new. So it is scanner sc is equal to new scanner, and I mention a parameter system.in. That is, sc will read the data from my system.in console. Okay, so sc object will access my input console. When I say system.out, that console becomes an output, and system.in is nothing but my input console. So we have to first create an object of class scanner, and then with the help of the object you can read the data from the console. Now whatever we are entering in on the console, the data will be of any data type. It could be integer, boolean, character, string, okay, double, float. So there are different methods of scanner classes. Okay, that is, first is the next boolean. It reads a boolean value from the user. Okay, so the return type of it is what? Boolean. Next byte, it reads a byte from the user. So the returning is what? Byte. Next double, it reads a double from the user. Next float reads a float from the user. Next int reads an integer value. Next reads a string value from the user. Stops input when space is encountered. Now I'll show you an example of a difference between next and next line. Next long will help us to read a long value, and next short will help us to read a short value from the user. So first we'll see an example of these, then you will be able to understand how it is being used. Now here you can see the first thing I have to do now, whenever you are creating a scanner object, first thing you have to do is you have to import. Import is a keyword over here, and you have to import the library class. Okay, so java.util.scanner is the library class, so I am going to import that in my program. If you don't do this, then it will give me an error on this line, because this program doesn't know who is scanner class. So for that you have to tell that program that okay, if you want to know where is the scanner class, then the definition of the scanner class is present here. Okay, so you can go there and check the definition. So we have to import it. So now here I created an object, that is sc. Object name can be anything. Okay, it's just an object name. It can be your name also, like obj. It could be anything. Okay, so here I have, just to understand, we made it as sc and system.in. Now here you can see enter your name. So this is on the output console. I'm using a string variable s, and I say sc dot. Now these all methods whichever we have seen just now, these methods have to be accessed with the help of the object. Okay, so the object is what over here? Sc. So this is sc dot next line. So it will read the entire line whichever you have entered till you press enter button. Okay, so that value will get read and stored in the variable s, and welcome, and then the s will get concatenated, and that message will be shown on my output console. So let's see the program. So this is java c sam1 dot java, and java sam1. Now here you can see enter your name. So supposing I enter my name, so you can see welcome and the whole name came. Now there is a difference between next and next line. If you don't use next line, you just write next. Okay, so what did it say? It will read the string till it encounters a space. So after space it won't read anything. So supposing the same program, I am writing my name, and here you can see the output has come welcome Rupali. After space the whole string has not been read. So it depends, like if you want to read everything from the user, then you have to always, it's good to have make use of next line. Okay, now supposing you want to read an integer value or a float value. Okay, say enter a number, right, and say integer uh, num equal to sc dot, what was it, next int. So next int is a method. Okay, and I'll write system dot out dot println value entered is and num. and enter a number. So you can see value entered is 34. So if you want a float value to read, then instead of int I give float, and next instead of int I write what? Float. So you should know these methods. So what you can do is you can just keep a note of all these methods, and when we do the programs you can accordingly use the methods. Basically, depending on the data type, if you are trying to read a float, then it will be next float. Next is the common name, you can see the string, and after that it is nothing but the data type. So whichever data type you want, that you can put. The value entered is 45.45. Fine. So in this way you can use, so all the programs whichever we have done previously, you can convert the same programs by you putting a scanner, using a scanner object and accepting the value from the user instead of writing it or assigning it to a variable. Now today we are going to solve few examples which are based on the previous uh, class. The first program is write a menu based program of a calculator. Now calculator is like when I want to create any menu based program, I am going to use the switch statements. Okay, so here I am going to make use of the switch statement. So now let's begin. Okay, now my battery is low, so what I'll do is I'm not having access to my charger. So these programs I will just shortly make another video and send it across to you. Thank you.